In Counter-Strike Global Offensive, the size of a team's map pool will always be a frequent topic of discussion because we're not just talking about the maps that they do play. I mean, there are some teams that, because of how it works out and how far they make it in tournaments, they don't play two maps or they very rarely play two or three maps. But we're also talking about the maps that they play and are good at and therefore have a reasonable chance against other teams, against teams of their level, or maybe even a chance to upset teams above them in the hierarchy. So yes, we have amazing teams in Counter-Strike right now, like Virtus.pro and Dignitas, who have incredibly wide map pools. There's almost no maps these guys can't play, and if they really wanted against specific opponents, they could even play the maps that they in general are permabanning. Then you have teams, though, who have good players in them, like G2 or Mouse Sports, who have very shallow map pools, actually. Only one or two maps that they have a really good chance on, and then you get into the one or two maps that, like, it really depends. If it's against a lower opponent, they could win. They maybe could get it against a better opponent and have a chance on it, but that's why they aren't winning many best of three at the moment. So the discussion is often raised along the lines of why can't all, top 10, top 15 ranked teams, why can't they all just have deeper or deep map pools? People often will say things like they should just practice all the maps more, or it's their job to be good at Counter-Strike, they should be good on all the maps. This is an incredibly simplistic and flawed approach to this topic because in general, you look at these top 10, top 15 teams, pretty much all these teams practice roughly the same amount of time. Maybe an hour more, an hour less, depending on the team, if we're talking about from Europe or NA or whatever. They in general practice the same amount of time, and that's because there only is so much time in a day, especially with the travel for events. So time is an incredibly limited, finite resource for these teams. So as a result, their primary focus has to be to practice the maps that they are good at, to maintain their level on those maps. Because it's not as though you just get good on a map and you've learned a map and then you go, right, I'm good on it, so I don't have to practice that anymore. No, you have to keep practicing it even more to remain the best on it, to remain very good on it, to keep up that level that you're good on it. Because even knowing the things you want to do on a map and them being relevant to the meta, you have to practice the execution of those. And that means going over it so it becomes rote, so it becomes routine, so that it becomes subconscious as to what you do at this point and this point, and therefore you can think about other things during the strategy, like what is the timing of this guy coming, and not necessarily just what you're doing and where you're throwing your flash or your smoke. So think about it. In the NBA, elite basketball players who are the best in the entire NBA at shooting free throws don't go, right, well, I'm the best at that anyway, so I can now start practicing on my post game. No, they practice free throws every single day, even if they have the best percentage in the NBA, because that's how they got the best percentage in the NBA, and that's how they're maintaining the best percentage in the NBA. They must continue the routine. There's also the case that even on your best maps that you are the best at and you learned and you're good at, you don't stay good on them. You must keep evolving your approach. And you must keep learning what the current metagame of how people play on that map is, so that your approach can either fit that and be the best in the metagame, or be a response to the metagame, or a counter to the metagame, or something innovative that's ahead of the metagame. That's why you have to keep focusing on it. It's not think of the two best teams of all time, probably on specific maps. So we've got Fnatic 2015 on Inferno. We've got SK Gaming right now on Train. These teams didn't get amazing on Inferno and Train and go, right, well, forget about those maps. We'll start practicing the other maps. No, they have to keep practicing those maps. In fact, you see throughout the history of that Fnatic team playing Inferno and SK playing Train now, they've evolved how they play their CT setups and then what they do on T side. They themselves have to keep practicing just like everyone else does. In fact, if they want to remain the best and have that be a home map that they can always rely on in a best of three, they might have to practice that map more than some other teams out there. Then there's the fact that people adapt to what you do that works. By using it again against them again and again, you essentially teach them what is beating them and what works, and they either copy it or they find a counter to it. So as a result, you must keep evolving your game as well to be ahead of them or respond to what they're doing. So as a result, some of your practice, no matter who you are, has to be on your best maps, which are your best chance, remember, to win series, to win best of ones, to go deep in tournaments, and ultimately to win championships. So those are one of your primary focuses in practice. It's actually the maps that you know the best to remain the best on them. Beyond those 1 to 2 maps that people tend to have as like ultra amazing home maps, then you usually have 2 to 3 maps which you practice because you're not banning them very often, so they're going to be available, and because they're available, you're going to be forced to play them based on the pick ban and which opponents you play at what point in what time. So you're going to focus on these maps, depending on how good you are in each of them, and your aptitude and how often you have to play them. You're going to figure out the rest of your time on these other maps here. Hence, most teams do isolate one map and make it a permaban, so they can take that out of the equation. So now they're working with a map pool of 6, then maybe there's one they don't play as much and people don't tend to pick against them as much, so they have that as their secondary ban in the rotation for a best of 3, and now they've got 5 maps that they have to work on. They've got the 1 to 2 they're really good on, they're working on, and the other 2 to 3, you can see already, if you think about all the best teams in the world, how their map pools develop and how it's going in this scenario. Now, they might be better or worse at those 2 to 3, depending on what team they are, what skill they've got, what team play, what tactics, sure, but in general, it's modeling like this for most teams. So the more time you spend on maps that you are not good on is more time taken from the maps that you are good on, or that you're at least decent on, and that you either want to keep very good or improve a bit from decent and get with a new meta on. So you can either spend more and more time on the maps you're really bad at, and in general are probably banning anyway when available, or you can spend more time on the maps you're amazing at, ensure you get that map win in a best of 3, and then the other team can maybe win their map, and then got your maps in the middle, which are going to be your decider maps. Now, which one makes more sense to winning a best of 3? Obviously the latter, rather than practicing the weaker one. Because you get the weaker one up a little bit, you're probably still reasonably weak on it, not going to beat the best teams in the world in it. Now you've let your best team maps drop off, now you might lose some games to teams you wouldn't have before, and now your middle maps stay the same or aren't improving much, therefore you're actually going to win less best of 3s, you're going to win less best of 1s even. This is what's funny about this approach. Then you've got to consider that as a result, it is more time efficient to spend your time and your focus and your effort on the maps that you're very good at, and the maps that are in the middle that you're going to play as your third map, your deciders, and occasionally, if you're lucky, the other team's going to pick as one of their maps, and therefore you might have a chance to win 2-0 in a series. Likewise, since you can't just get good on a map and then go, right, now I can leave that to one side, shelve it, I'm going to focus on other maps, you also can't just improve a map and then focus on a map elsewhere. If you improve a map, you must keep improving in that way. The middle maps also have to be worked on constantly. A lot of the teams that have deep map pools, this is a little thing that people don't think about, a nuance. A lot of the teams that win on 6 maps in the pool, 5 maps in the pool, are not actually practicing all those maps the same amount. They aren't even practicing those lower maps a lot. They're actually winning on some of the lower end maps just because they're a better team. Because they have better skill, because they have better tactic, because they have better team play, because they have a better overall team unit concept. These make better reads in the game. They're not practicing their 5th and 6th maps so much that they're good enough to beat amazing teams on them as well. That's just how incredible they are as a team. And then as a secondary aspect, they can then win on extra maps that they're actually practicing the least out of their map pool. Because they're the best teams in the world. That's the whole point we're making here. Oftentimes, you don't even choose what maps you're good on or what maps you're bad on. So what happens is you get a new team and you play the maps. And your team's strengths emerge from the individuals and then how they fit together. Your style, you fit to those aspects. And these dictate the maps that you end up being good on. That's why teams who are good on certain maps tend to have a flow on other certain maps. Like, have you noticed a lot of the teams who are good on Dust 2 are also good on Cache? These maps have some similarities in that sense. A lot of the teams who are amazing on Train also have talent on Cobble. You can see parallels because of what it takes to be a very good T-side team on one of these maps or a good CT side team on the other maps. There's shared similarities here because of the style, the makeup of the team, and then the individual skill of the players. That sort of dictates what maps you are good on in this sense. Likewise, you don't always know what maps you're bad at. Your bad maps emerge where even if you play them a lot, even if you practice them a lot, even if some of your players were good on the map before, with this unit you play it and you find out we're just not good on this map. It doesn't work for us. It's not working in this sense. You've also got to add in, since teams on average make a roster move, roughly every 9 months or so, then you're in a scenario where they're having to learn a new map pool. You can't take it for granted what the old map pool. Look at Na'Vi. They changed one player, Zeus, out, but because they also lost their in-game leader, now they've had to totally redesign their map pool. Now they can't even play Cobblestone, one of the best maps for Na'Vi before. Now they start playing Nuka map they never play. So the differences can be drastic, and it's not like you have a team for 5 years and you build these maps up and you get them good and then you work on these ones, No, you're having to reset all the time and then figure out quickly what maps you're good at, what maps you're bad at, and then practice accordingly in an efficient manner to be effective on as many maps as you can be, and especially on the best maps to give yourself a chance to go deep in tournaments. Consider what makes a team good on the CT side of a map. Because a lot of teams that might have a very good system for the T side, they know who goes in first, who goes in second, who flashes, who supports, who's the lurker, who's the op. They know all these things for all the maps. But when it comes to being the CT side, what makes you good on them? Which remember, CT sides are half of the game. It's having people who can play a specific spot very well, sometimes particularly well. Like Taz famously used to at the inside on trainers. CT has always made Virtus.pro an incredibly good map there, because he's not one of the best players in the world, but at that spot, he is actually one of the best. Likewise, Taco from SK has become a master of that spot. Again, not one of the best players in the world, one of the best at that spot though, and you can see how this elevates you. Then you've got to consider having good team play between specific spots. How do you crossfire? How do you cover for the other guy? How do you play aggressively together so that you back this guy up? How do you pull off if he's going to die so that you can do the proper retake? These are incredibly difficult things to figure out, and you can't just improve all of them. You can't get them all working for 6 or 7 maps in a pool. The in-game leader, knowing what the rotation times are, how to call people over to other sites. The better the players are at each of the spots and work between each other, the less he has to do in this sense. The less he has to mastermind it and read the thoughts of where someone's going to be. He knows what they're going to do because they're very good at that spot. As a result, CT sides and how good you are is very, very map dependent. And that's one of the key reasons why teams have small map pools. Look at the teams that have really shallow map pools but are in the top 10, the top 15. The only instances you ever see of a team that has a shallow map pool but is truly world class are the very rare outlier, extremely skill-laden teams. So there's 2 we can think of. Fnatic 2016 at the beginning of the year, where they had an insane 5-man light, which was wrecking everyone. They could be very shallow map pool. 2 or 3 maps that they were really legit good at. And then some, Train, Overpass, they just got wins on just because they were Fnatic. They weren't good on these maps. Then you go over to the envious, the one that was the Kenny S Apex era, where they brought them in after the summer, and obviously they went to the final of Cologne and they won Cluj. This lineup, again, very shallow. They only had 3 maps they were really good at, and then beyond that, they were quite shaky. And they only would get the odd win on a map like a Dust 2 just by having this mad amount of skill, not by understanding the metagame of how to play the map, not by having very good CT rotations, not by having great tactics. They just could outskill you on it. So those are extreme outliers, because already the makeup of those teams is just not something anyone else can replicate, really. Typically, the teams with the deepest map pools are the best teams in the world. That's what people aren't thinking about in this. Make your map pool there. Well, that's like saying just make yourself the best team in the world. Look at the teams earlier this year. So Na'Vi and Luminosity were the 2 most consistent teams outside of Fnatic, that crazy outlier. And they had the deepest map pools in the entire scene. Look at last year. Fnatic, Astralis, Virtus.pro. 3 of the most consistent teams of the whole year, taking out the Envious lineup, which was the big outlier. Deepest map pools in the whole scene. Now look at the teams that have chances to upset people, but are very shallow on map pools now. So we got the Mouse Sports lineup earlier this year when they had Nex. They had an amazing Dust 2. They had a pretty good cash. Beyond that, not a whole lot. Now, why didn't they go far? Why didn't they have a better map pool? They lacked leadership, and they actually didn't even have enough skill to make that raw skill style work. And they were playing the skill maps anyway, Dust 2 and Cash. And that was it. That was where they were limited, and they couldn't go far, and they never really got out of many groups or won many best of 3s. Then you look at Dignitas when they had Kirby earlier in the year. Okay, they had Cobalt, they had Inferno. Obviously, Inferno took out the map pool, but they didn't have a whole lot else. That team lacked skill. They had great tactics. They had good team play. They lacked the skill to execute on the tactics, so they only had a couple of maps that they were specialists at. Envious this year, because obviously they dropped off, didn't they? And they had to bring in Devil. Okay, they had Cash, they had Cobble. Earlier in the year, they had Mirage. This is a team where the skill dropped off, and now they couldn't go deep in tournaments anymore. They lacked leadership, they lacked tactics, much as the old team did as well. But now they didn't have the skill, they couldn't even make it work, and they were originally one of the outliers. FaZe literally had 1 map for most of the year. They had Train that they were specialists at, that was about it. They had all the skill in the world, but they lacked leadership massively, and they really lacked solid team play between the players, knowing what the roles were. In general, telling teams to get a deeper map pool, or you should have a deep map, is like basically just telling them, get more skill, get better tactics, or get better team play, depending on which one you lack. Well, that's what they're all trying to do anyway. That's the purpose of practice. That's the purpose of bringing in new players. That's the purpose of working to improve. Those are the 3 fundamental pillars of being a good Counter-Strike team as it is. So that is absolutely worthless advice to give. And it's not as simple as just get better on this map. Because the reason you might not be good on this map is you might not have the player to play this specific spot on the map. Well, that means you have to get that player. You can't just keep practicing it and suddenly get good on it. In an ideal world, sure, every team would be able to play all maps at least a low level, like at least the basic fundamentals of it, not be good on it, but that's purely so that if you then go against a team a tier below you or below you in the rankings, you can at least exploit pick ban more. Like, you don't have to ban this, and if you did play it and they're not good on it either, you might be able to get a win on it. That's the way that you want to do it, because that avoids upset losses where, because you ban it out even though they're not good on it, you will live in a world where you both play a map you're both good on, and therefore, since they're just a bit worse than you, they can get the upset win. If you put it onto maps where you're both not that good at it, and you can at least play the basics, now your other fundamentals will probably win you that game. We don't want people playing in a scenario where against better opposition, they're going to play their weakest maps. No, that wouldn't make sense anyway. And that's why most of these best teams in the world, I told you about, Na'Vi, Luminosity, Fnatic last year, Virtus.pro, Astralis last year, they also in general didn't just go to their strongest maps if it was strong for you. They exploited the map pool against teams they played. So if you're a very good team and you're good on Train and Cobble, then Fnatic wouldn't play you on these maps. They'd go and play you on Overpass and you'd be like, well, I'm not that good on it. And then they'd get the auto win pretty much. So you can see the way the map pools work and the way that a lot of people are modeling them at the moment is quite naive, where there's a lot of nuance and a lot of difficulty to getting good at maps, staying good at maps, and expanding that map pool, because a lot of it even depends on who you are as a team.